Hey, Tender Wild podcast listeners. Today is an update on two of our brilliant guests and the powerful art they're putting out into the world. Over about a year and a half ago, Kate and I went to see a dance theater piece by Kristin Mars and Anne Marie Nest called Chalk, which is about both of their journeys through miscarriage and infertility. We were blown away by this piece's depth, humanity, and yes, even humor. We laughed a lot. So we had Kristin and Anne Marie on the podcast to talk about their stories and how they came together to create this. Well, these amazing women have been busy in this last year because they have developed the piece into a full-length show. It opened in Denver last weekend and will open in Iowa City for 4 shows at the James next weekend, March 21 to 24. Last weekend, in the performance in Denver, this is what an audience member shared. My husband and I saw Chalk, and it was probably the most powerful and meaningful thing I've seen in the years we've been on this journey. The rawness and realness was incredibly touching, and while it brought up so much grief and pain, it also gave meaning and a sense of relief knowing that I'm not alone. Another audience member said, "Chalk is so good. I hope lots of men see it. My husband was crying by the end because he realized what I went through 28 years ago." Kate and I are definitely going to Chalk. We hope to see you there too. It's a powerful piece. Come see it at the James in Iowa City, March 21 to 24. You can find tickets at www.thejamesic.com.
Who were you before you lost your wild self?
That's what we're helping you explore on the Tend Her Wild podcast.
Through questions and tools around how best to listen to your inner voice,
rewild ourselves, and live the most authentic life where we thrive instead of survive.
I'm Betsy.
And I'm Kate.
And we're so glad you've joined us for this episode. Hello, Tender Wild podcast listeners. We are excited to interview a dynamic duo today.
Mm-hmm.
We are here today with Anne Marie Nest and Kristin Mars. And this duo, these two creative heads came together to create an original work of dance and theater that Kate and I witnessed. We had this opportunity to watch it live, and we were completely moved, blown away. I still think about parts of that maybe we can talk about.
Yeah.
And so we decided we have to have them on to talk about the topic of infertility and miscarriage. And this is something we haven't talked about. So this is where we're headed today.
Yeah.
So let us tell you a little bit more about these amazing women. We're going to start with Kristin Mars. She's an Iowa native. She's a dancer, choreographer, and movement teacher. She's an associate professor of instruction and the director of graduate studies at the University of Iowa Department of Dance, where she teaches a wide variety of courses across the dance and somatic curriculum. She is also a certified Alexander Technique teacher and has a private studio in Iowa City where she works with students of all ages and abilities in improving alignment, breathing, postural tone, and ease of movement. She is also a proud mama of 2 kids.
Yes. And Anne Marie, who's also with us, met Kristin at the University of Iowa while she was a professor of voice and speech in the theater department. Prior to her career in academia, Anne Marie was a professional actor, working primarily in regional theaters and Shakespeare festivals. Anne Marie now works as an executive coach and communications consultant for the Fortune 500 and AM Law 200. She's an associate teacher of Fitzmaurice voice work, a trained mediator through Columbia University, and a certified CTI coach. So you two are a powerful combo.
I'm also a proud mother of 2. I can't believe I didn't put that on there.
Proud mother of
Both
2.
proud mamas of 2.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell us first about this piece, because we already alluded to it and we want to know sort of how the two of you came together. And then we're going to go into sort of where this all started. But we'd love to hear more about this piece?
Well, this piece, which is called Chalk, this dance theater work, which is still in progress and yet to be fully produced. You had the benefit of seeing the alpha version of it, was centered around our journeys through multiple miscarriages and infertility. And the genesis of this project came through our friendship, really. So Anne Marie and I met when we both lived in Iowa, but we didn't really connect as friends until I started having trouble maintaining a pregnancy for my second child. And a mutual friend connected us. And at that point, I felt so alone in this journey that I really just needed to speak to another woman who had been through it. And Anne Marie was one of my lifelines through this very difficult, years-long process of trying to bear a second child. And so that's really where it all started, through our friendship and our connection over a really challenging time in my life.
That explains a little bit when we witnessed your piece, the true friendship and connection. It wasn't just that you had these independent experiences and then came together. You were actually there for one another in real time during this. And that makes a lot more sense to me now, just how deep that connection is with both of you.
And Anne Marie, I wanted to give you a chance to also say what this piece was like for you and what it meant for you.
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to take our connection back even further, where, yes, I knew her in Iowa City, and I remember seeing her in Kathy Devine's office, and Kathy Devine is an amazing midwife who helped both of us, in a functional medicine practitioner. And I was trying to have a second child, was having miscarriages, and she walked through with her beautiful baby and his baby Bjorn. And I thought, oh, and then for some people, it's so easy. Right. And during that time, I was also seeing her mother as my Alexander teacher. And it's funny because I thought it was your mom that connected us, because I remember being through that rough time with her. And I remember her feeling concerned for me, like really concerned, do you know? And so I feel like our connection, and I took the first part of your Alexander course. You know, there was a lot of connections even before she called me, but I was so happy when she called me in New Jersey. I had left the university and had a second child and left the university and was living in New Jersey, and I got the call from her. And I don't know if you have experienced this, but whenever you go through a really hard time in your life, it's sort of like, oh, let this be for some good to someone. Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
And it made me feel like, oh, I can give back a little something here from this really hard time. So, and then I actually had it in my mind to create a piece about miscarriage and motherhood and epigenetics, and because my grandmothers had my grandmother and great grandmother had lost many children. And I was reading The Artist's Way, and they, you know, in the book, she says, if a creative opportunity comes your way, you say yes. And my neighbor said, I'm putting up this collage of dance pieces. Do you want to put something in there? And I was like, well, I'm not a dancer, but I could do something dance theater-ish. So I did a 10-minute piece on my experience with miscarriage, but also my grandmother's losses. And during that time, I get this call from Kristin. She said, Anne Marie, this is really random, but do you want to create a piece with me on miscarriage and motherhood and maybe our ancestors? There's this grant I think we could apply for. I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
Meant to be.
Yeah.
And you guys got a competitive grant. Why don't you speak to that for a moment, Kristin? Because this is not this is not an easy grant to get, and the two of you got it.
Yeah, we were really blessed to be awarded a residency through the Obermann Center for Interdisciplinary Research. which is housed at the University of Iowa. And they have special funds provided by the Laura Spelman Rockefeller Grant, which we have to give a shout out to, which is devoted towards things related to maternal health and child welfare and education. And so this was just a really great fit for this particular grant. And so I think the folks that also were on the committee awarding it to us kind of recognize the vitality of, or not necessarily the vitality, but the necessity of bringing this kind of conversation out into the open, because so many women go through it in the dark.
And then you came together this summer of 24, and I'm always amazed at how quickly you put this together. Can you just share a little bit about the timing of all this?
Yeah, so we started working remotely. We Zoomed, as people do, and brainstormed ideas. We started writing independently. We had a shared Google folder where we talked. We just got some of our stories out on the page to kind of see where the overlaps were. And then our first in-person collaboration happened in the spring. I went to Denver for a few days in the middle of a blizzard, lived with Anne Marie and her family. And we spent some time in the studio, mainly just talking. We recorded our conversations and then transcribed them, and got a lot of the meat of our material in that blizzard in March. And then Anne Marie, do you want to talk about the intensive period that we worked on together this summer?
Yeah. So I remember having that 4 days and going, well, I don't know that we got much done, but it sure was fun,
Yeah.
And then we showed up and we started working together, and we had these intentions that we put up on the wall. And Kristin and I are both type A hardworking women. And one of our intentions was, it can be easy. And that, we went back to that several times. And we realized when we started, wow, it was easy in Denver. And look at all of this material we really have, and how far along we actually are. We didn't realize, over Denver and the Zooms and all of that. And then we started, and I have done lots of collaborations and I've devised lots of work, but I have to say, working with Kristin was like a dream. We just were on the same page. There was a lot of, yes, that too. Yes, I agree. Oh, that didn't work. No, yeah, it certainly didn't. Let's do this. Let's do that. What about, yes, let's try that. It was just heaven. It really was one of those magical collaboration processes. And there were times when our energy was like, oh, it should be more, it should be better, it should be different. And we said, no, it can be easy.
And what a beautiful message in comparison to what you both went through in terms of your medical history that was not easy, to then transform it into, okay, us creating a creative piece. This can be easy. This can be easy. I love that.
I do too. And it also feels very feminine, like the collaboration. You just can tell the feminine vibe of what you put together.
Well, I'd love to hear both of your personal stories around this. And clearly you each had your own unique journey, and yet there seemed to be so much overlap between what the two of you went through and then how you so depicted your journeys in this piece. So we usually start by asking everyone about their first 10 years. And we have no idea whether or not that's even a question that ties into what you both went through with infertility. And but you just have already mentioned ancestry and ancestors. And so let's start with Anne Marie. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your first 10 years, and then maybe if there was a through line into then what you experienced in terms of childbearing.
Yeah. So my first 10 years were primarily spent in the Midwest, in Michigan and Wisconsin. And I was the eldest of 4 siblings, and we were all about a year and a half apart. So when I was 6 years old, my mother had her 4th child. And I was a little mother and loved that part of it. And one of the things that I really remember is that my mother constantly said, my greatest joy is being a mom. She had been a teacher, and this was what she really wanted to do. It was like her commitment to stay at home. And I remember not totally identifying with that even as a young kid. Like, I really wanted to be a ballerina and an actor. And I was like, well, that sounds like kids might get in the way, do you know? But I also really remember the story of my great grandmother that it was told in my family in these sort of kind of vague ways. And I never heard the whole story until I actually worked on a piece the first time. But I remember hearing about Loretta that died at 8 years old because they were at the farm table and the kerosene lamp tipped over and she caught on fire. And my grandpa tried to trudge her through the snowdrifts in, Wisconsin to get her to the hospital. And she had lost twin 2-year-olds. She lost a baby at birth. And she lost a baby at 4, a 4-year-old to pneumonia. And that was always part of our family lore. Also, that my grandmother was sick so she had her first baby really easily. And then I come to find out now, actually just recently at my aunt's memorial, which is crazy, that she had toxemia when Carol was in her womb, her first child. And the doctor at the time would not take the baby early because of the way it would look with her timing of her marriage. It would look like they got pregnant before the wedding.
Oh my. Wow.
So my grandmother had severe health complications for 4 years and had about 4 or 5 miscarriages. We don't really know how many because she was quiet about it before she had her second child. And, the reason I know about this story is that at the memorial, the second child, Jack, who's now in his late 70s, said, I just remember being a kid and grandma being so sick she couldn't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm. Oh my.
Yeah. So it's in your history. And
Yeah.
Kristin, what about you? What about your first 10 years and any connection to sort of what you went through later in life?
I mean, just hearing Anne Marie talk about sort of this revelation that happened years later. I also grew up in the Midwest. I come from German farm stock. Yes. And very much a pull up yourself by your bootstraps kind of mentality and ethic. One of the ancestors that was often brought to my attention was my great aunt Laura, who I never met. She had already died by the time I was born. My grandfather's sister, he had 11 brothers and sisters, and she had passed away. And she was always what my mom described as her favorite aunt. She was the fun one. She was the one who was, eager to get down on the floor and play and have kids over to her house. But she didn't have kids of her own. And I learned from my mom at some point in my infertility journey, that this was a great hardship for her. And one of my mom's few memories of an adult crying, in the 40s and 50s, was watching her aunt cry and be comforted. And later, my mom's older sister said, yeah, she was crying because she didn't have any children of her own.
Mm.
And that revelation so late in my life was really profound. I have her teapot, her favorite color was yellow. I have her yellow tea towels.
Mm.
Those things were passed down to me, and I cherish them now, not just because she was the favorite aunt, but because I feel this connection to her.
Mm.
I have no idea what her journey was like. I know she suffered from depression. But in terms of the resources that she had, in terms of, what was available then, this was all the stuff that I went through, that Anne Marie went through, IVF, all those supplements we took, all the literature, all the Dr. Google, none of that was part of her story. And I'm so curious what her story was. And I wish I knew, but I feel at least that I have some kind of connection with her because I know a little bit of her story.
Oh, love that. So maybe we'll just dive into your stories, your infertility journey. And I think what strikes me is that women that went before you, generations before you, were not able to share their stories openly. It was so private, and they had to hold all that so close, and the suffering that probably went along with that. So I think hearing your stories today for women will be really powerful. It's something that connects women that I think our generations are more open about, and that only helps other women to not feel alone. So Anne Marie, are you willing to share?
Sure. Yeah, I want to start by recognizing the many shared demographics that Kristin and I have. We are white women in our 40s of a certain socioeconomic class, upper middle class. We had really wonderful access to healthcare. We live in a first world country, all of this stuff. And when Kristin and I were working on the piece, we came across an article, a study run by the World Health Organization. And it was this beautiful ethnographic piece where they interviewed women throughout the world that had experienced miscarriage and actually also stillbirth. And what was surprising to me and striking to me is how everyone felt isolation, shame, guilt, and really so alone in their experience. And that was striking to me. And I wish I had known that when I was going through it, really. But I would say that when I first wanted to have children, well, actually what happened was my first miscarriage was, I didn't even know I was pregnant. My husband and I were engaged, and I tell this story in the piece. And it was sort of like, well, we don't need protection because we're getting married. And like, I had always heard from my mom that she had gone through menopause at 39. I don't really know if it was menopause, but that was her claim. And so she always was like, the time is ticking.
Tick tock.
And so I was like, well, I'm 36, I'm probably old eggs already, like whatever. Then like 6 or 7 weeks later, I was working at a theater and I just started doubling over in pain. And I didn't realize what was happening. And I'm not entirely sure if it was like a little too severe to be implantation cramping. And so I think my body was already trying to get rid of the embryo. And I was happy to find out I was pregnant, but then quickly found out it wasn't viable. And I had my first DNC, which is a dilate and cooterage. Is that what it is? Is that what the full term is, Kristin? Do you remember?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
So it's a term that we threw around in the piece that afterwards some people were like, I don't know what a DNC is. Mm-hmm. Oh. And it's when they go in and they sort of scrape out the uterine lining and get rid of any of the fetal tissue and any of the other tissue around there that makes you feel pregnant. It is also what they do in an abortion. It is the same procedure, but it can be life-saving for a lot of women.
Right.
And I was about to go on my honeymoon in a remote island off of the coast of Maine. And I remember saying to my doctor, it was like, again, 2 weeks before my wedding. And I said, well, I really would like to let it happen naturally. And he was like, I'm not letting you go to a remote island in Maine and naturally miscarry, because there can be lots of problems that happen with that, which I at that time didn't know.
Yeah.
So that was a very interesting start to my marriage. And then I tried to get pregnant again on purpose and lost that baby, and then felt so was starting to feel like I may not be able to have children. At this point, I felt so deeply connected to that desire to have a child. Like it wasn't there before, really. It was something about the hormones, I think, or, you know, something getting my body going, my soul going, like, this is what I want. And then I got pregnant with my second child and was under medical supervision and taking progesterone to help hold the baby. And I ended up having a healthy baby, although she was breech and born early. And if it had not been for medical intervention, we both probably would have died in labor. The cord was wrapped around her neck and her arm, and she was sitting cross-legged in my pelvis. So the outcomes for a vaginal birth would have been probably not great. And then my daughter was colicky. I'm going to make this as short as I can. I've already been a long time here. My daughter was colicky, and I thought, I don't want another child. And then after, when she turned 2, I was like, yes, I do. I deeply want another child. I don't know where it came from. I always say that Evie Evangeline was this little soul tugging on my heart, and she kept tugging, you know. And Betsy, I knew you during this whole time, and I was going to your yoga classes, and I was crying in those yoga classes. And, you know, then I had 3 miscarriages over the course of 2.5 years. One of them was deeply devastating. I was rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night. I was losing my breath. All my vitals were in danger. I don't know really what was happening other than I was laboring and my body was freaking out about it. And they let me go home. They didn't have anyone there to perform a DNC at the hospital. And they sent me home and said, well, call us.
Yeah, call us.
And I called and I said, well, I think I must have passed the baby. I don't know. I think I'm fine. And I ended up talking to Kathy Devine, my midwife, later, and she said, you know, I am horrified that they let you go. Like, you could have very easily hemorrhaged and bled out that night, you know. So that has been striking to me, especially in the world today that we're in the sort of politicizing healthcare and DNCs and the availability of
sending women home. It's happening very regularly out of doctor's fear, right?
And so, more and more, yeah. And then I ended up at the end of that journey, I talk about this moment where after I had a round of IVF, my hormones were crazy. I finally was like, universe, I get it. I'm not meant to have a baby. Bawled and bawled and bawled and bawled, gave it up. And then I met with Kathy Devine to balance out my hormones. And she said, I don't think you have to be done if you don't want to be done. And so I always say, Kathy Devine got me pregnant. I mean, my husband played a role. Kathy Devine got me pregnant.
And then it worked.
And then it worked. And, you know, for a lot of women, it doesn't work. But whatever, I was doing all these supplements and everything. And Kathy gave me a Femero, which is like Clomid. It gets your body producing more and bigger egg sacs, basically, essentially ovaries. I'm going to totally butcher this. Some doctor's going to be listening. That's not what happens. But you know, then I took this drug and they monitor it through ultrasound. And then when my ovary got big enough, I went and got a shot of HCG. And then she said, you and Frank need to have sex every other day for the next week.
Wow.
And now Evangeline is here.
And now beautiful Evangeline is here.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, so many ups and downs. And I do remember you, Anne Marie, in my class crying. And it's interesting that I didn't know what was going on. Just like for many of my students, I don't know what's going on. I just know there's something happening. And that was part of your piece as well, the silence and the sort of that you have to hold this close and not talk about it. Is sort of a part of so many women's journey with infertility and miscarriage.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my doctor that I wanted to take FMLA leave after the really difficult miscarriage. And I said to her, can you make it more vague than a child loss? Because I don't want to be taking time off for a woman's reasons.
You didn't think it would be accepted by your department? Or...
Well, and already my department, like when I first had my first child, they were like, well, you can always go down to lecturer line. Like you don't have to stay on the tenure track. It's really hard to be on the tenure track and have a baby. And so already there was a I don't know if it was, maybe we can call it a benign bias, but there was definitely not a understanding of what it was to be a woman on the tenure track to bear children.
Yeah.
Those struggles.
Which is also very interesting to think about how far maybe we've come but have not come when it comes to that, because the journey for so many women to get pregnant and to stay pregnant is it's health, right? It's like part of our healthcare story, and our systems don't honor that, right? They still don't in so many ways, other than the very traditional way to have things happen. So thank you for openly sharing.
Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Yoga Mama, which is all the many offerings I have blending psychological science with the ancient wisdom of yoga and mindfulness. Join me for a yoga class, a meditation weekend, an online course, Wisdom Wednesday, which is the first Wednesday of every month, or maybe even an international retreat like Greece in the fall of 2025. By providing spaces and experiences for people to look inward, it is my great honor to watch people become the change they wish to see in the world.
This podcast is being sponsored by Kate Moreland Coaching. As a transformational coach and an advocate for authenticity and well-being, I work to support individuals and organizations navigating challenging times. Whether you are an individual, a leader, or an organization, your creative power lies in your authenticity. Doing the work to understand your strengths and acknowledge the patterns and rocks that are in your way is the path to well-being. Whether it's your career or your relationship with yourself or others, transformational change begins within. To learn more, reach out to me at katemorelandcoaching.com.
Kristin, we'd love to hear about your journey.
Yeah, so I guess I'll piggyback off of what Anne Marie was saying about us both having access to really good healthcare. And at the same time, so much of my journey was marked by really awful experiences within our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And so I remember after my first miscarriage, I had gone in for my 8 or 10 week ultrasound where it's the first time you see the baby, but there was no heartbeat. And so I had to go back. They were like, well, we don't know for sure. You might be wrong about the date. I was like, I'm not wrong about the date, but whatever. And I went out to the waiting room. They had to schedule me for the next week. And the person at the desk asks me, so when's the due date? And, it's like nobody sent a memo, right? So I'm breaking down crying. My husband's dealing with it. The woman at the desk feels terrible, of course. So that was the first miscarriage. Second miscarriage also happened about the same time, around 8 to 10 weeks, overlapped with my 40th birthday, which was, awesome. Felt great to be turning 40 and getting this extra sort of knife in the heart of, oh yeah, you're aging out of this ability to have children. And that really took me by surprise. I am a well-educated woman, and yet somehow I still thought, because I'm a dancer, because I take care of my body, because a lot of people think I'm younger than I am, that my eggs would be, they would be 10 years younger, but they weren't. And that really took me by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, another thing that was really surprising to me, the first 2 miscarriages I passed naturally at home. But I also didn't realize how long miscarriages can last. For me, for those first 2 miscarriages, it wasn't just like a bad night in the bathroom. I mean, it was that, but it was also 3 or 4 weeks of continuous bleeding. So I was still going to work. I was teaching ballet classes, And I was still experiencing that dull ache in my belly. It was constant reminder, seeing the blood every day that that this was happening.
Yeah.
And I didn't consider really taking leave from work. But there, that's a thing I want to highlight, that there is no miscarriage leave. There's no structural space to grieve. There was, I never knew what to do to sort of to mark the loss. With the two that happened at home, I ended up flushing here's another medical term, the products of conception, right? Which I felt was such a insult to what I felt to be my baby, right? And everything I had created to support it.
Yeah.
But that got flushed down the toilet. How does that doesn't.
For me too. For me too. And it was at 13 weeks. So it was quite clearly.
Yeah. Significant.
So that's not a funeral. That's not a ceremony. That's not a ritual that you want to hold on to. It's a horrifying experience. And then, as miscarriages go, 3 and 4 weren't so bad. The first was what you would call a chemical pregnancy. And my last miscarriage, I did have a DNC for. And, again, I remember the week after the follow-up, I was going to the doctor for some other reason. And, someone on the medical team just asked, like, oh, what were you here for? And I said, I got a DNC. And they said very casually, oh, yeah, we do like 3 or 4 of those a week. I was like, okay, great. So, throughout the experience, I just had all these interactions with people in medicine who I felt were not really seeing me and my story, but
your pain.
just
And the grief.
Kind of shifting me through the motions of the hospital. After the 5th miscarriage, I turned to IVF. I did 1 round where I got no viable embryos. We had them genetically tested. And then the 2nd round, I got 1 viable embryo. I was actually in a theater rehearsing for an opera that I had choreographed when the IVF doctor called me. I ran out of the theater, and he told me that he had very good news that I have 1 viable embryo. But then it's not over, right? You've got to,
Right.
it's got to implant, it's got to take, but yeah, miraculously, that 1 viable embryo became my daughter. And I was doing all the things just like Anne Marie. I was taking all the supplements. I was taking care of myself as best I could. But that doesn't happen for everyone. And I really want to emphasize that is, so often on this journey, I just heard, keep trying, you'll get your rainbow baby. That's the term that's often used in infertility circles for a baby that comes after a child loss. But some women don't.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give myself any credit for the stuff that I did. I have to give credit to the doctors. But her life is a grace. And
some of it is just lucky. And, I think what's interesting is that both Kristin and I have memories of a doctor saying, well, it's not your fault. Which was like, wait, I didn't even think it was my fault. Oh, wait, you're saying it could have, it was my fault. Oh, wait, there's a whole dialogue saying about it's my fault. And then when we read this WHO research, we were like, oh, every woman is led to believe it's their fault. Whether it's in the opposite, the negative, it's not your fault, right? But that there's something you did you waited too long, or you didn't do the right things, or you were too stressed, or you didn't take the right vitamins, or or your husband is not nice to you, or you somehow, I also hear women say, like, part of me didn't want the baby. Like, I thought it would bring too much stress to my life. And then when I miscarried, I felt guilty that I had that thought, as if that thought killed the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then the sort of the pull that both of she and I felt about, like, I will do all the things.
Yeah.
Was because it's my fault. I'm killing these babies.
Yeah. That was the part in your piece that I have so many parts of that piece that I remember, but both of you with all your supplements and you each have like 10 bottles of supplements and yeah, the almost the pressure of having to be perfect and create the perfect womb space and make sure you have all of the right supplements on board and you're eating the right diet. Just can either of you talk about the pressure of that? Because I assume that maybe is there for so many women going through this.
It's like the shadow side of having access to all of that stuff and having the financial wherewithal to engage in all of that. Although some people go into a lot of debt, but I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah. Right. One of our lines in the piece is something like, oh, it's such a blessing that I can afford all this, which is meant a little tongue in cheek, I guess, because it was also so consuming. I was obsessed, day and night. This is what I was thinking about. Like, oh, should I be drinking out of this plastic bottle? Should I, I threw out all my Tupperware and got all glass. And when I visited Anne Marie, she had the exact same glass storage containers in her house. Like everything became a potential toxin. And a lot of the supplements too are not things that are necessarily recommended by mainstream medicine. And so there's all this Googling of like, what did other women try? What worked for them? How do you know that it's not doing more harm than good? And so it's a little crazy making.
Yeah. And I'll share, I had a period of infertility before our first baby, and I had a lot of, it's like this, you can't control it. And so you look for anything that you can somehow put your arms around that you can take charge of. I remember feeling that very much. And it was, for me, watching your piece really brought back a lot of feelings that I had never really expressed to anybody. This was in the late 90s, and I felt very alone. And so I do think there is, when you're high achieving, I was at the time too, and you're like, I can figure this out. Like there's a formula here. If I just tweak this and do this, I quit a job that was highly stressful. I mean, there were several things that I thought I could control. And so it's certainly, I mean, everyone's experience is unique, but I felt the common thread between the two of your stories and then so many women now that I know that have been through that are so common, and so much emotion that you're right. The medical systems really don't tap into, or they shy away from, right? They say the wrong thing out of just, fear of saying the wrong thing.
So I want to ask the three of you, because all of you have been through it. What's the silencing part about? Like, why is this such a silence, a thing that we don't talk about, that women don't talk about, that society doesn't talk about, we don't have public service announcements about this. We don't, right? Like why is this such in many ways, a taboo subject?
Well, I think it's multifactorial. I mean, thankfully we are starting to talk about it more, and our piece is hopefully going to spark conversation in lots of ways, but I felt ashamed. I felt like it was my fault. I also, like, even people that were close to me, like my mother would say, well, it's God's way, but that baby wouldn't have been would have had a lot of struggles. Like it was like I was just supposed to be, it was just natural, and I was supposed to just flow with it. And I felt embarrassed that I couldn't just flow with it. And I remember thinking, why am I so sad? Like, as some other people would say, it's just a collection of cells. Like, I don't understand why you're so sad. So there was that feeling. And also, like, I don't have the fortitude or the mental health or the strength to get through it. And I don't know. I guess I didn't know it was common. That I didn't know.
Right.
I knew people had miscarriages, but I didn't know the experience was common. I didn't know it was so hard for many people.
On myself, I know that, when I had heard of friends having miscarriages, I had no idea. I hadn't, I just had no idea. And in particular, before I was a mom, before I even wanted kids, I didn't get it. And I know some of my own silence resulted because when I did share with some people, either asking for support or just expressing what had happened, I didn't get in return what I needed. And so it just felt unsafe to share the information because I didn't think the lives of the babies I had lost would be honored in the way that I needed them to be. So that was part of the reason for my silence.
What do you think women need who've gone through it? Because I really resonated or heard that, Kristin, that even if I told people, I wasn't getting back what I needed. And so what do you think women need when they go through something like this from their friends, from their partners, from, the medical system, from their employer? What do you think they need? And I know that's a hard question, but.
We asked that question to someone that we interviewed as part of our project. And, we sort of asked her, like, what do you want people to know? And she said, just to know how hard it is. And I also think it's really different for every person. I had this super strong, I named each of not only the babies I lost with the miscarriages, but also all of the unviable embryos that I got through the IVF process. And that's probably not everybody's experience. And I think that, in general, when we hear bad news or when I tell someone bad news, I just want someone to listen and be present, to really do their best to hear my story and witness it. And if someone is too afraid to witness it or too uncomfortable, too immature, then they can't provide whatever it is that woman needs.
For me, the infertility silence was everyone around me was having children so easily, all the people close to me. And so I didn't know who to share my struggle with. And I did eventually find a woman that was going through it, and we took many, many walks together. And it was like the first time I felt like I could talk about it, and she truly understood. So for me, I had to almost wait for that person to show up in my life because I didn't feel like anyone was really going to be able to hear me and understand me unless they'd actually been through it. And so, so I think the support group, I remember looking online. This was, wasn't online. I looked in the yellow pages. Like, is there a support group somewhere? Like someone, a infertility support group. I remember, and I couldn't find anything. And even the physicians like, there used to be one. And I'm like, what do you mean there used to be one? So I just remember feeling like, I guess I shouldn't need support. Nobody seems to be providing support. And again, hopefully that's not the case now. But back then, yeah, it was just lockdown. Nobody talked.
It's not they are not as ubiquitous as they need to be, these support groups. There are people, know of a few doing wonderful work with grief groups and support groups. And I found a woman, it was almost like each woman took on leading it. We had all had loss, so it was sort of like a grassroots. There was no professional facilitating, but we all took on the role of leading. And those groups were easy. Those groups had their own difficulty because some people would leave because they got pregnant. And other people would not ever get pregnant.
That's
Survivor
complicated.
guilt is the thing.
Yes.
Whole other thing, survivor guilt from the person and then the person who's left behind, right? Like it's complicated. It's very complicated. And I think a friend of mine who's never wanted to have children and never has had children, I showed her the video and we were thinking of having her direct, ironically, because she's just so empathic of a person. And she said, I wonder what the way in is for people who have not experienced this at all. And I think I can't tell you how many times I've heard from other people who have experienced loss or grief, especially loss or grief that's different, that have the same thing, like, just be with me in my grief. And there's a woman who wrote a wonderful book called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies, I've been told. I might be butchering the title a little, but she had fourth stage cancer, and she was young, and it's like that. Those are the platitudes that we say, but they're not always helpful. And I think to realize that miscarriage does cause grief in many people, not everyone, but it causes a deeper grief as losing a child or losing a parent, or having a loved one go through Alzheimer's and that complicated grief there, right? Understanding that and holding that, and that it's not a lesser loss. Like that's what a lot of people kind of inferred, that it was this lesser thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even that term, it's a clump of cells. Right? What are you so upset about? Right? There's a tone of that, even in the terminology for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kristin, you said before about witnessing, like sometimes, and I know some of the grief stuff we've talked about on this podcast, it's holding space and just being present. And it's not about what you needing to say anything. It's just witnessing the grief. It needs to be witnessed. That is probably one of the most healing things, is to have someone else witness the grief. So, but it's finding the safe person and the right person and the right circumstances, and maybe women as a collective we can just do better at recognizing and asking, would you like me to witness this with you? Because sometimes we're afraid to ask that of others, but we can on the other side say, I'm happy to witness this for you and be there for you in whatever way you need me, because everyone is different. But grief is powerful emotion, and we need to honor that that's part of this experience.
And I would say that there also needs to be policies in place. There also needs to be some education about the experience within residency, right? There also needs to be more and better funded grief groups, because I will say miscarriage and infertility is not going away. The more that women wait, the more I hear women say, well, I'm only 37. I'm like, oh, my hairdresser was like saying, well, I'm 41. I'm not sure if I want to have kids or not. I'm like, but I didn't say anything. But it's like this thing is not going away, and we will need more and more support for women. And it's not just a woman's problem,
Right.
That's such a good point. This isn't just a woman's problem. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So this beautiful piece that you put together, I mean, we're hoping that you guys are going to go on a tour and take this around. I mean, this is Kate and I's hope. We're like,
yeah,
we need to
bring it here.
They need to show this all over the country.
Yeah.
And I really do think that this piece was humorous. It was empathic. It was poignant. It brought tears to my eyes. It made me laugh. It kind of encompassed the whole realm of emotion. It was so well done. So I guess I'd like to hear from both of you. What was most surprising about putting this together? Or how did it maybe even bring some healing to your own heart by doing this? I'm seeing Kristin, you're nodding your head.
I was surprised that we had so much fun. We had so
We
much
did.
fun. Yeah. I mean, before Anne Marie showed up, I was excited to see you, Anne Marie, but I was kind of dreading the process. Because
like calling up trauma and like dumping it out. Yeah.
And maybe about halfway through our process, we did a draft of the piece that we recorded for ourselves. And afterwards we were like, oh, this is too heavy. You know, we didn't want the piece to be total quote unquote trauma dumping onto our audience. And so we were conscious about working in ways to not just lighten things up for the sake of lightening things up, but also pointing towards the absurdity of some of the stuff that we went through, that we put ourselves through, that the medical culture put us through. And a lot of that was just, it was just really fun.
I was surprised by the absurdity. It is absurd. There is an absurdness to it, and how there's a clowning element that ended up naturally arising out of the creation process, which I couldn't have guessed at. You know, and I will say, Kristin and I have watched lots of young artists create work, and like a lot of times, very young artists are like, everything's very precious, and it's very deep, and like we were like, oh, this feels like an 18-year-old's piece. Let's add some other pieces.
Yeah, you were both so vulnerable, and yet you did this in a way that was educating, and you took us right along your journeys, both together and separately. That the power of it is that it's the full range of human emotion around an issue that we in this country tend to make very small. And that's what I really thought, you know, these stories for women. I mean, you have independently multiple stories of your reproductive health care and your journey, and everyone's unique. And that's it. To me, it spoke so much to the human experience of a woman in this realm, and how individualized all of this is, the response to it and the journey itself. And so it's such a timely conversation, and it's just so brave. So I just want to honor how brave you both were in doing this.
Thanks so much for that. You know, I'm thinking of just another reason that I was silent, and that I think a lot of women might be silent around this issue. And that's just, this is related to the shame thing, but fear of judgment. Just because there are such strong opinions around women's fertility and reproductive health. I know I was, part of the reason I didn't want to complain to people was that, you know, I was in my early 40s. Like, duh, what do you think is going to happen, Kristin? Of course you're going to have a miscarriage. And so I think that fear of judgment is a real thing.
Well, to kind of put a bow on this a little bit, if we can, kind of some closure here, what is the plan and what are you hoping for this?
Yeah, I want to know the big dreams,
yes,
where this piece is going to go.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's if we continue this piece, and we plan to, but to what end? Like, you know, if it's just for us, we had that, you know, we had our loved ones and the people that we admire most in that room with us. We shared our story, we processed a lot. But I think for me, it's being really clear about, can this help other people? Can it expand the dialogue? Can it help others that don't understand? Can it spark conversation in a different way? And that's kind of abstract. I'll let you speak to maybe some of the more tangible, but or whatever you want, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think to those ends, we do want more people to know how significant this particular kind of pain and loss and grief is. And that's something that we want to communicate to other women, right? So that they have a shared space. It's something we want to communicate to medical communities, practitioners, something that we just want the population at large to have a better understanding of. And so ultimately our hope is to perform in a variety of places and include with our production some sort of post-performance panel with experts in the area who have experience helping women through infertility and miscarriage, and opening up some dialogue that connects our particular stories to some of the bigger stories surrounding women's reproductive health, that stories that we can't tell because they're not our own, but that we think our stories can serve as a springboard for some of those bigger conversations. So that is our hope moving forward.
And I will say, you did ask what was healing about the piece. Another story that I'll share is that my husband was in the audience, and some of our disconnect has been that he has said, I don't really get why you were so upset. And he was sad because he watched me be tortured by the process and he just couldn't understand it. And I looked over at him at one point, and he had tears streaming down his cheeks.
During the performance.
During the performance. And he said after, and he's not an artist, and this is such a testament to theater and dance in particular. He said, there was something about watching it be in your body in an abstract way that helped me finally get it.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think art heals. I think the artists are really some of the truest healers in our culture, because they can just, that's so perfectly put, they can somehow bring it to our culture in a way that we can finally feel it in our own body or system. And yeah, watching both of you move on that stage.
We both were like, oh my God, look at them.
Yeah.
Like you were, it's phenomenal.
It was so good. It was so good. So I really hope this piece has a life going forward, because I think it will make some significant ripples in people's lives and hearts, and maybe even some policy changes down the road, because certainly more support for women who've gone through this, time off is so important.
Yeah. And furthering that individual decision, the importance of women feeling embodied and in control of their own stories and their own paths, and the uniqueness of each of your stories, even though there's a lot of connection, that, we as women, these are our bodies that we're talking about, and the experiences we're having are ours. And so, yeah, all of this education and discussion is so important right now. As I think about my daughter, right? And we all have a daughter. So this next generation being more open in these discussions and supporting one another, and the power of the collective, once again, to make things, to help change.
So we have to ask you our last question. I'm so curious for each of you. So you clearly both are these wild women. I think that's why I have been attracted to you over these years, that both of you have been through my life and friends and people I really admire and look up to. And I think there's a thread of this wildness, this piece that you created. Again, the vulnerability, the authenticity, the voice. It was so clearly wild and outside the box, which is what this podcast is all about. So we talk about these 4 doors, and we did not create these doors.
No.
As Dr. Clarissa Pinkola asked us from the famous book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. So we each take a door to our wild nature, to our wild self. And you can have more than one door, but the first door is, if you have an old story, that is a door into your wildness.
And if you have a deep scar, that is a door.
If you love the sky and the water so much you can barely stand it, that is a door.
And if you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is a door. So, Anne Marie, which door most resonates for you?
All the doors. But definitely, I think the one that's pinging the most for me is the last one.
Deeper life, full life.
Sane life. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Kristin?
Same, the fourth door. People always, when I was a kid, always called me an old soul. And now that I'm older, I just feel so young. Like I don't know, I don't know anything. And I'm always craving to go deeper.
Well, and you both went so deep with this piece of work and making sense of such a complicated topic for the viewer. And I know moving forward, you will do that for so many more. So thank you for coming on today and sharing your stories so hopefully and openly. I know it's going to help our listeners and unite us as women in a lot of ways. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, two beautiful souls. What an honor to spend this morning with you.
Thank you both for the work that you're doing in the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us and for discussing this topic.
Absolutely. We're going to put all of your information in the show notes. Is there anything you guys want to put out there before we sign off? Where to find you? We'll just get it all in the notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ideally we would already have some sort of website that you could follow us on or an Instagram handle. We don't have that.
Not that cool.
We're not that cool, but maybe we could think of it after and put in the show notes.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yes.
That's
And
beautiful. And when this
Share an update.
comes out again, when you guys
Yeah.
are performing this, we're going to put an update out on this on the podcast as well.
And we're coming again to see it.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Come back and rewild with us again next week.